One of the darkest chapters in American history mentions a man who was sent to death row for brutally attacking two people. He was later described as the happiest man on death row. But who was he, how did he end up in prison, and why did he get that nickname? Born in 1915, Joe Arridi grew up in the steel town of Pueblo, Colorado. He didn't speak for the first 5 years of his life, and when he went to school, it soon became clear to his teachers that Arridi would not be able to learn in a regular program. For a while, his mother tried to homeschool him, but at age 10, his parents sent him to the Colorado State School for Children with Developmental Disabilities. According to materials from his file, doctors estimated his IQ at 46 points, a very low measure of mental ability that less than 1% of people on the planet possess. By comparison, the average IQ is 90,100 points. Early in his childhood, Joe Arridi's life took a divergent path. In 1925, at the tender age of 10, he found himself enrolled in the State School for Children with Developmental Disabilities. However, medical assessments painted a stark picture of his development, equating it to that of a 6-year-old child. While Arridi could speak, he struggled with fundamental tasks such as singing, writing, basic mathematics, and even recalling colors. It didn't take long for the astute doctors at the school to recognize that young Joe was vulnerable to the manipulation of his peers. On one occasion, his fellow students coaxed him into admitting to a theft he had not committed, a confession he readily accepted. After a year of intensive training, Arridi exhibited improved adaptation to societal norms, prompting his return home. Yet there was no structured support system in place for him, and he was not reintegrated into an educational environment. Consequently, he roamed the streets aimlessly throughout the day. Eventually, his parents succeeded in enrolling him in a mainstream school, but his assimilation into the curriculum remained severely limited. In 1929, 4 years later, due to his disruptive behavior, Arridi found himself back in the public school system. He remained there for 7 years, a period marked by multiple escape attempts, all futilely thwarted by authorities. Upon his departure from school in 1936, at the age of 21, Arridi became increasingly isolated, leading a vagabond existence with sporadic visits to his family's home. However, this trajectory changed dramatically following a fateful and life-altering event that transpired in late summer. During the night of August 15, 1936, a horrifying incident unfolded. As the parents of 12-year-old Barbara Drain and her 15-year-old sister, Dorothy, were away on a visit, an intruder invaded their home with the sinister intent of harming the girls while they slept. Tragically, this malevolent act left the younger sister in a coma, from which she miraculously recovered, while the elder sister, Dorothy, met a devastating and untimely end. The quest for justice in Dorothy's murder commenced, and the Colorado police cast suspicion upon Frank Aguilar, a Mexican national employed by the girl's father. There was compelling evidence pointing towards him. Barbara, upon regaining consciousness after a week-long coma, promptly identified Aguilar as the assailant. Moreover, a search of Aguilar's residence uncovered an axe strikingly similar to the murder weapon. However, even with these substantial pieces of evidence, the legal proceedings faced significant delays, primarily because Aguilar adamantly refused to confess to the crime. As public outcry intensified, exerting immense pressure on law enforcement, the need to secure a confession became paramount. This compelled authorities to turn their attention toward Joe Arridi. Joe Arridi, who harbored a profound fear of the police, became an easy target for detectives who skillfully induced him to admit to a crime he had not committed. Astonishingly, within a mere day, law enforcement officials presented a written confession, attributing it to Joe Arridi, despite the 21-year-old's significant difficulties in writing block letters, making it highly implausible that he could have created such a document unassisted. Furthermore, officers managed to coax Arridi into falsely stating that he had used a baseball bat to harm the girls, even though subsequent investigation revealed that the murder weapon was, in fact, an axe. The mystery surrounding the identity of Dorothy Drain's killer took a perplexing turn as both Joe Arridi and Frank Aguilar became ensnared in accusations. Aguilar, in an attempt to deflect blame, pointed fingers at Arridi, who, bewildered by the unfolding events, passively complied without mounting any defense of his rights. Only years later would the shocking revelation emerge that Arridi might not have even been in town on the fateful night of the crime. Remarkably, Frank Aguilar had already adeptly navigated a similar accusation in his criminal history when he assaulted a sleeping housekeeper. But the housekeeper managed to resist his advances, and he escaped any significant punishment. The circumstances surrounding his evasion of justice remained obscure. The case against Arridi rested on scant evidence, primarily a hair found at the crime scene that could potentially have been linked to Joe. The second piece of evidence stemmed from his confession and the assertion that he appeared to recognize Aguilar, as he identified him as "That's Frank" when asked to identify an alleged accomplice. Life on death row for Joe Arridi was marked by perplexing uncertainties. Given his extreme suggestibility, it remained a challenging endeavor to determine whether he had been coerced into identifying Frank Aguilar or if any prior acquaintance existed between them. During the court proceedings, Barbara Drain, with unwavering conviction, asserted that Aguilar was her assailant and that she had never encountered Arridi before. Nevertheless, despite the dearth of concrete evidence, Joe Arridi received a death sentence on December 22, 1936. His legal defense pursued appeals, contending that Arridi's testimony should not be deemed reliable due to his limited intellectual capacities. To substantiate this claim, they posed straightforward questions to Arridi in the courtroom, inquiring about his knowledge of figures like George Washington or his familiarity with the appearance of an axe. Regrettably, Joe struggled to provide coherent responses. Yet in 1937, the jury deemed Arridi fully sane and accountable for his actions. Curiously, it appeared that Arridi remained oblivious to the gravity of his predicament. Incarcerated on death row, he found solace in playing with his toys, engaging in banter with fellow prisoners, and even granting interviews to journalists, displaying a demeanor that defied the grim reality of his situation. In the moments leading up to his passing, Joe Arridi bestowed his most treasured possession, a toy train, upon a fellow prisoner and made an unconventional request for his final meal: a simple serving of ice cream. When prompted to utter his last words, Arridi responded with an unwavering good-naturedness, expressing his intent to raise chickens and play the harp in heaven. A prison warden, reflecting on Joe Arridi in an interview, offered a poignant perspective. "The man we executed was a mere 6-year-old at heart, devoid of comprehension as to why his life was being taken. He remained the most cheerful soul on death row." Remarkably, this prison warden had fiercely advocated for Joe Arridi's life until the very end. He personally financed legal representation, successfully securing 9 postponements of Arridi's death sentence. However, the intervention of the governor ultimately sealed Arridi's fate, culminating in his execution on January 7, 1939. He was laid to rest at Woodpecker Hill. In the moments preceding his demise, Joe Arridi recited a child's rendition of a prayer twice as he struggled to memorize the adult version. As the fateful execution unfolded, tears welled up in the eyes of the warden and a select few witnesses, a poignant testament to the profound tragedy of the situation. The following day, the media featured headlines that resonated across the nation, such as "23-year-old executed for murder," New York Daily News, noting that he had worn a smile moments before his untimely death. Yet these headlines could do little to rectify the profound injustice that had befallen this wrongfully convicted man. The tale of Joe Arridi sent shockwaves through the community, prompting the formation of the enduring Friends of Joe Arridi movement, which continues to advocate for the prevention of further egregious miscarriages of justice within the American prison system. In a significant development in 2011, Colorado's Governor Bill Ritter posthumously pardoned Joe Arridi, acknowledging that while the pardon could not erase the tragic chapter in Colorado's history, it was a step toward restoring Arridi's tarnished reputation. Governor Ritter aptly remarked, "Arridi's pardon cannot undo this tragic event in Colorado history. However, in the interest of justice and simple decency, we want to restore his good name." Meanwhile, the actual perpetrator, Frank Aguilar, faced the consequences of his actions a few months later, when he was convicted by the testimony of Joe Arridi and subsequently executed in 1937.